guys, it's Jordan. This is our weekly refuge video, and we're starting a new series this week on Easter. So let me be the first to wish you Happy Easter. Now I know it's not Easter yet, but ever since Valentine's Day at Walmart or Target, they had Easter stuff out. So we're in that season. And I don't know how you grew up with Easter. I remember being very excited to get downstairs. My mom made an Easter basket. And there's a lot of cool things about Easter. It's typically a happy time of year. Some of the things in there, you get to eat an unreal amount of candy. It's like the holy version of Halloween, where it's all blessed, and you get to eat this nice, delicious candy. People at church during the day, they dress up in pretty pastel stuff you get beat up for, called a nerd, wearing any other time of the year. But it's beautiful and it's fun around Easter. Additionally, we color eggs. It's probably a weird tradition, but we color eggs. We did it with Lincoln last year and had a blast dyeing the eggs and everything. And then you hide them, and the kids run around going to look for them on a beautiful sunny day. It's a nice, happy time. Now, in this series, we're going to talk about why Easter is a big deal, especially for Jesus followers in the church. And if you're like me growing up, you might have wondered, why is Easter even a thing? Well, in this series, I want to answer that, and not just why we do Easter, why we celebrate Easter in general, but as a church, why it's such a big deal and why it can really just change your life when you understand Easter. Now, before I get into that, I want to single out a tradition with Easter that's a little freaky, and it's the one with the big giant bunny. I mean, obviously growing up, you guys have encountered this. There's a couple internet videos that are classic that I love about this. The first one's from America's Funniest Home Videos. The dad tries to surprise the kids as the Easter bunny. It doesn't go well. Check this out.
Coming to see you all tonight.
The Easter Bunny!
Yeah. Look at your pretty eggs.
Mommy, can we pick them out?
No, don't bother them yet. They're still drying.
I want to do that to Lincoln at some point. After that, there's one that recently just became a meme where the Easter Bunny tries to surprise a bunch of kids in the classroom. Look at this one. Now this next one's not as famous. You might not have seen it, but it quickly became my favorite when I saw it. This little girl goes to see the Easter Bunny, and it's just awkward. Watch this.
Cheese. Give me big cheese in it. Cheese it. All right. Stare at the bunny.
Ella.
We tried to sit him down and he started freaking out. It's like, what are you doing?
Ella. Yeah, there we go.
Is that weird, Ella? The big bunny, silly.
So cute.
That dude was a straight creeper, the way he sat there. I'm with that little girl. That was weird. Anyway, it brings up what I want to talk about. Fear. Right? Easter's a happy, happy occasion. One thing we know about fear with Easter, with life, with whatever, fear can sap and take away your happiness faster than anything. Now, whatever your particular fear is, you don't have to tell me, it's real to you. We all have them. And fear can really determine the direction you take in life. We make decisions to do or don't do certain things based on fear. We're living in a world right now that's doing certain things and not doing other things because of fear. We avoid people or conversations throughout our lives because we're afraid the way it may go, in our favor or not. And we spend a lot of time numbing ourselves from our life, from our problems, looking at screens, just kind of turning our brains off because we don't want to face it. We don't want to face the fear we're up against. Now, whether we realize it or not, fear is really fueling so many of our actions. Now, there's one thing that's interesting about it. At root bottom, there's something that connects it all, and that is the fear of death. Now, you might be thinking, whoa, Jordan, you just took a dark turn on me. I'm worried about failing my algebra test, and you're talking about the fear of death. Well, let me explain here. I'm not just talking about physical death. It's about the end of something, the death of something. For example, some of the fears you may have right now. You're afraid of the reality of really truly being yourself, because you think if people really knew you, they might reject you, and it'd be the end of those relationships. Maybe you're afraid that with the future being a little uncertain, you may not graduate on time, you may not get into the college you want to. The dream you had of your future, maybe that's ending. You're fearing the death of that dream. Or maybe you're afraid you're going to get found out. You got some secrets, some things you're ashamed of, you're worried, your friends, your family, somebody may find out. And the image they had of you will die. That's what I mean, the fear of death. Now, whether it's physical death or the death of something like that, the fear of death comes down to losing something we'll never get back. When you think about the times you've been hurt, your heart has been broken the worst, it's because you lose something you can't change. The death of a loved one, the death of a dream, something like that. And death, or fear rather, tries to convince us that that death is final, that there's nothing you can do about it, and it's over, it's done. So if our fear comes true, if the friendship ends, the dream dies, the goal isn't achieved, what then? At the end of our lives, do we realize that there was nothing we can do and it's just misery all the time? And that's just flat out devastating. There's no hope in that. And that's why I want to talk about Easter. Easter changes everything. Now, as we head into the Easter season, I probably don't need to tell you, it's not about the chocolate, it's not about the eggs, it's not about the weird bunny, right? Especially in the church, we celebrate Easter because it's about Jesus. It's about the rescue mission and the victory Jesus achieved on Easter. Now, Jesus came down, he lived a sinless life, but he died a sinner's death on the cross to pay for our sins. He died, he was laid in a tomb, but when no one was expecting it, he did exactly what he promised he would do. He rose. He came back to life, he defeated Satan, sin, and death, and he walked out of that tomb. And so at Easter, we celebrate this miraculous, earth-shattering, world-changing event. It changes everything. And it changed everything for a man named Paul. You've probably heard of Paul. He wrote a third of the New Testament. He's a very big deal, the greatest missionary the world has ever known. You may not have known, Paul spent years of his life as a mercenary working for the Jewish crew who wasn't all about Jesus and Christianity to find, round up, persecute, and even kill Christians. That was his job. That's what he did until he met Jesus. Jesus showed up one day, knocked Paul on his rear end and said, Paul, I have a different job for you. You're working for me now. You're going to spread the gospel, the good news that I, God, I, Jesus, have overcome. I defeated Satan, I defeated sin, I defeated death, and I've got nothing but love for you and humanity, and I'm offering forgiveness and grace. So that's what Paul did. It was not an easy road, and Jesus promised him it would not be an easy road. So Paul was, let's see here, he was shipwrecked. Imagine that. Being on the high seas, tempestuous waves come, you get thrown overboard, you wash up on shore one day, imprisoned. And these weren't jails like we have today, not that that's even a great idea, but back then they were rough prisons. He was threatened often for his life. He was beaten. I don't know if you've ever been hit or in a fight. Imagine just a crew beating you and there's nothing you can do about it. He was bitten by venomous snakes, and he was stoned on more than one occasion. But he kept going. It appeared that Paul wasn't afraid. He knew the risk. He knew what he was up against, trying to spread the gospel during that time. But the guy would not back down. He was not ruled by fear. Now, why was that? How was Paul able to do this? Well, he wrote a letter to the Corinthian church. And at one point, he gets done talking about Jesus, gets done talking about Easter, Jesus rising from the grave after 3 days, and he says this, 1 Corinthians 15, that's our verse for the week, 54 through 55. He says, death is swallowed up in victory because of Jesus. And then he taunts death. Oh, death, where is your victory? Oh, death, where is your sting? Paul's threatening the very idea of death, saying, you got nothing on me. He's telling the Corinthian church that when Jesus died and rose again, he defeated death. And that means because of the resurrection, death can no longer ultimately defeat us. The power that death has over our relationships, over our reputations, our futures, our hopes, our bodies, it's gone, thanks to what Jesus did on Easter. We no longer have to fear any kind of death because Jesus destroyed death once and for all. Paul say in Corinthians, John will say in Revelation, that Jesus is going to, in the end, ultimately completely defeat Satan, sin, and the last enemy he's going to kick in the teeth is death. That's the paradigm we find ourselves in. That's why we celebrate at Easter. Jesus hung on the cross, was placed in a tomb, and it seemed like death had won. Humanity's greatest fears came to fruition. The followers of Jesus who thought they found hope against death thought it was all over. But then he rose, and it changed everything. The power of Jesus over death changed everything. And this, again, is why Paul was able to live the way he did. I talked about the time Paul got stoned. Well, one time he got stoned because he went into a town to preach the good news of Jesus Christ. And they didn't want to hear it. So they drug him outside, and they pelted him with golf ball, with softball-sized rocks until they thought he was dead. He took one to the temple. He goes down. They think he's a dead man, and they go back in the town. Later, Paul wakes up. And I don't know how you would feel in that moment. I'd be angry, I'd be bitter, and I'd be terrified for my life. Paul brushed himself off, looked at that town and said, I got a job to do, and they need Jesus, and I'm going back in. And he did. He walked back in. How do you live like that without that kind of fear? It's amazing. Now, it's not that Paul didn't have fear. It just didn't dictate his life. It didn't dictate his actions. Something else did. And that was the power of Jesus that he trusted in. Paul trusted that the fears he faced were no match for the power of Jesus Christ. This is what Easter's all about. If Jesus can defeat death, he can handle whatever you're afraid of too, whatever I'm afraid of. See, fear is going to make you think it has the final word. That at the end of the day, it's going to win. Fear wants to convince you you're not good enough, you'll never find your purpose, no one's going to like you or love you, that you can't handle it. It's going to try to get you to obey it. That's the power fear has. But fear is only powerful if it convinces you that it's final, if you believe it. Fear is going to try to make you believe that nothing is stronger than fear. But, as we see, Jesus is. Jesus is the biggest, baddest dude on the block, and fear and death have nothing on him. It doesn't get the final say. Jesus does. Now, again, I get it. You might be thinking, great, Jordan. It doesn't mean I'm not afraid. It doesn't mean I don't have things going down in my life. It doesn't mean the world doesn't look like it's falling apart right now. It doesn't mean I'm not anxious, I'm not stressed, I'm not depressed. I understand. I'm with you. Even if fear doesn't get the final word, there's still things going on that out of our control we can't handle. But you may be more equipped than you realize to handle this fear. Why do I say that? Because the same guy, Paul, in Romans 8, wrote this. The Spirit of God, who raised Jesus from the dead, lives in you too. If you're a Jesus follower, if you're a Christian, the power that rose Jesus from the dead is not just back 2,000 years ago with Jesus in that tomb. That same power, God says, through his word, resides in us. That changes everything. It really does. As Paul is saying, that same power 2,000 years ago that raised Jesus from the dead is actually inside of the people who believe and follow Jesus today. Maybe that's why Paul could live the way he did. Not without fear, but overcoming his fear and living on purpose, on mission with Jesus. Now, I don't know what you're up against. I don't know what your fear is. I don't know what's holding you back. Is fear holding you back in your relationships? Is it holding you back from dreaming big about your future, about going to college? Maybe there's something going on and you're so afraid to acknowledge issues with your mental health or just your thinking. Maybe there's something you know you should do. Someone you should reach out to. Maybe there's something you need to do to handle your reputation. Maybe you actually need to explore your faith in Jesus, because up to this point you've been afraid to even ask. And fear is holding you back from whatever that next step is in your life, in your faith journey. Well, I don't know, but think about what the next step is you need to take. What fear is it you need to overcome? Maybe it's forgiving somebody. Maybe it's apologizing to somebody and asking for their forgiveness. Maybe it's talking to a parent, a life group leader, your school counselor. Maybe it's seeing a doctor and starting a conversation. Maybe it's talking to your parents and telling them something you should have told them, you haven't told them yet. Maybe it's asking your small group leader for help, something you're afraid to admit, going to somebody you trust. Maybe it's exploring a new group of friends that are probably better for you than the ones you have. And maybe it's just sitting down and asking yourself and somebody you trust the honest questions you have about Christianity. This Easter, no matter what your next step is, you can begin to face your fear because you know Jesus is bigger than that fear. Because at Easter, because of what Jesus did at Easter, fear doesn't get to determine the direction of your life. You do by the power of Jesus that lives inside of you. Again, I don't know what your next step is, but I do know this. If you're somebody who believes in Jesus as your Lord and Savior, if you know and you know He is who He says He is, and He conquered Satan, sin, and death, and you have His power inside of you, because of that, you can handle whatever fear throws at you. You're not facing fear by yourself. You have Jesus standing beside you to walk you through this season. Whatever power fear has, Jesus took it away when He rose from the grave. And that means you don't have to worry about anything being more powerful than Jesus. I hope you hear that message. As you go into group with your leaders through Google Hangouts or Zoom or whatever you're using, talk about your fears, talk about what you're up against, and see how knowing the power of Jesus, not just for Jesus on that cross, but in you, in your life, and Jesus, if Jesus is for you, who can be against you? Jesus using that power on your behalf. Talk about how that would change everything if you could see the world and your life and future that way. Maybe that's how Paul could do what he did. Live a life that seemed so free from fear. This is why Easter is such a happy holiday. Because in spite of everything going on in the world, we have Jesus. And we have the power of Jesus at work for us and at work inside of us. This is why we can truly say during the season, Happy Easter. Guys, I miss you. I love you. Can't wait to see you again. Have a great week. Bye.
Damn it, darn it. One tarnation.
Bye.